Okay, so good morning. This is not day 4, this is days 6 and 7 of our workshop, both. Thank you for joining us. My name is Sandy Vasher, and this is the 9-day novella workshop where we all try to figure out how to write a novella in 9 days, go from blank page to edited, polished, proofread, published product that you can put on Amazon or BookFunnel or whatever it is that you want to put it on. Okay, so today we are at the point where we're going to start talking about editing. So I'm actually on day 7. Some of you may be on day 6. It doesn't matter when you start, thinking about this. The point is that my little scrolly box is all wrong. The point is that you are editing today. And because of that, we want to think about editing tips. So I've got just a few tips and kind of a short program here for us this morning. So let's take a look at what it is that we will be doing. So today, we're going to look at just what to edit, how to edit, and when to edit. So some nice, simple stuff just to get you going on that editing. You have 2 days for this. So this is 2 days to take your rough draft from rough draft to something that somebody could read, or more importantly, that you can proofread on day 8. So you want to finish this, these 2 days with a product that's basically done, where like all you're looking at later on is did you make any like little teeny tiny errors. So this is revising and editing all wrapped into one, which by the way is not how most people would advise that you write. So if you were doing something literary, if you were writing a long novel, if you're trying to get a book, like a full book published by a traditional publisher, then this is probably not the method that you want to use, because you want to be a little bit more careful. You want to put more space between your first draft and when you start editing. You probably want people to look at your product other than yourself. But with the 9-day novella, or if, say, you are a self-publisher and you're trying to rapid release things, you just don't necessarily have time for that. So this is a little bit of a quick and dirty kind of thing that we're looking at. All right, so let's take a look at, first of all, what it is that you are looking for. So what it is that you're editing when you go through that beautiful masterpiece that you created a couple days ago. And there are basically a couple things you want to watch out here for. So first of all, there's stuff that you want to take out. So look for wordiness. So places where you could have said something just with a few less words. Any words that you can take out are usually good. Look for convoluted sentences. So any place where like something seems garbled or it could be taken more than one way. So take those sentences out or clarify them. You want to watch for places where you've repeated yourself. So remove anything that has been said twice. You should look for like sort of your bad habit words. So things like really, very, like, or in my case, I use just a lot, or only, or well. If you have bad habit words, you want to replace those words with something that's more vivid, more descriptive. If you have long monologues, you should shorten those. Keep in mind that in real life, we don't talk in monologues other than when we're live streaming. So generally speaking, your characters aren't going to talk to themselves for pages and pages and pages. Just a couple sentences is all that they ever get. And then this is a little bit genre specific, but if you have cuss words in your novel and you're writing for children, or if you're doing something like writing for a sweeter romance crowd, you want to take those out and replace or remove them entirely. You don't need those in your story. A few little tips on this here. So those bad habit words, when you are editing quickly, it can be really hard to figure out what those are, right? Because you're going through a huge amount of words really fast. I mean, basically you need to do half your story on day 6 and half your story on day 7. So you're not giving your eyes a ton of a break, and you may not see that you use really a lot or that you use very a lot. So one thing you should do is just do like a project search. So at some point, search for those words and see if you're using things like very or really or like or whatever it is that your bad habit words are. You can also compile your document into a text file and then upload it to one of these like online word cloud things. So if you Google word cloud, you'll find these like online apps that come up where you can basically like upload text into like an online thing, and it will return for you a picture of what your manuscript or text looks like in terms of the most frequently used words. So you'll see like the words that you use the most in great big letters in this word cloud, and you'll see words that you use kind of pretty frequently in like smaller letters, and that can be really helpful just to give you a visual sense of what it is that you're doing that you really shouldn't be doing. Okay, so that is stuff to take out. Stuff to add in. Dialogue. So almost always there's not enough dialogue, right? Like you can never go wrong with dialogue. Dialogue moves the story quickly. So as long as the characters aren't doing monologue, then you can add that in. I probably should have put this in stuff to take out, but you might want to consider taking out your speech tags. So a speech tag is the said or asked or explained or shouted. So when you write dialogue and you say, Sandy, I don't know, like say I'm your character, and the line goes, "Look at that dog," said Sandy. That said is considered a speech tag. And speech tags are generally kind of frowned upon. So they get pretty redundant. The readers don't usually need a ton of them. I will admit this is one of my like worst habits in writing. I use tons of speech tags. It can be even worse. Like so if you're somebody like me and you like to say things like, "Look at that dog," Sandy spat or yelled or whispered or whatever. Those are even worse speech tags. So anytime that you're making that speech tag more obvious, you probably need to consider taking that out. Now, take that with a huge grain of salt, because for example, like if you're trying to describe volume, so you need to say that somebody whispered something, there's not a whole lot of easier ways to do that than to say Sandy whispered, or yelled or shouted. But use that stuff sort of sparingly. And as for like the saids and the asks, which are really like the two speech tags that you should be using the most often, but again, you want to keep them kind of light in your manuscript. So I find that I can take out about half of my speech tags. If I write a story and I put, said or says or asked or whatever in, I can usually take out approximately half of what I had without losing clarity. So keep in mind this is all about clarity, but we also don't want your reader to start feeling like they're just seeing saids all over the place. Other stuff to add in, sensory details. So I don't know about you guys, but when I write quickly, it takes away some of my ability to do this sort of like beautiful word painting of scenes or like describing characters. So when I go and edit, I like to add back in sort of strokes of sensory details. So if somebody especially is talking or if there's some kind of action, it's great if you can add in just a little hint of like what they're looking at or hearing or feeling. So give the reader something to like hang on to so that it doesn't feel like the story is happening just in a character's head. Light is a specific sensory detail that people tend to forget. Light can say a lot about what's going on in a scene. So if you can give us just a little information about is it dark? Is there sunlight filtering in? Is something glowing? That helps the reader know what's important in the story. Also, defining character traits. So, like if you didn't give your characters an eye color, or you didn't give them something that the reader will use to remember them by, like a scar or a birthmark or a favorite, sweater or something, maybe like a a way that they lean or a particularly odd body posture or whatever, go back in and consider adding that in, because those kinds of things make your characters more interesting to the reader. And then lastly, logical connectors. You want to add in anything the reader needs to know to understand an upcoming scene. So this could actually mean adding in full scenes. I had to do this a couple of times in my story over the last couple days. Sometimes we just don't get everything because when we're drafting, because it's in our heads, right? And we know the story. But the reader doesn't know the story. So you want to watch for times when you do something, maybe when you put the character at work, but you didn't bother to say what they actually did. Or you have the character at mom's house, but you don't bother to say where the hometown is. So this kind of thing is the sort of stuff that you might want to add in. As far as other things for editing, there's also stuff to fix. So you want to watch for inconsistencies. So specifically names, places, dates, times. So you want to spell names the same. If somebody's a sister in chapter 1, they should not be just a friend in chapter 2. You should watch out for the timeline. So if your story starts on a Monday and in the next chapter you're saying the next day, but it's a Wednesday, that's an inconsistency. Definitely watch for places. So if that bridal shower took place at a restaurant in chapter 1, then they should not suddenly be at a shower at a banquet hall in chapter 5. If you killed a character in chapter 2, they should not pop back up in chapter 8 unless you've got a good way to explain that. So make sure that you're looking for that. You also want to look for logical flaws. So this is something a lot of writers do. They sort of ask the reader to understand something in paragraph 1 that they then explain in paragraph 2. Or they ask the reader to understand something in sentence 1 that they then explain in sentence 2. If you do this, it's probably because it just sounded better to you in your head when you wrote it down. But look out for those, because it is definitely true that it's hard to catch. But when you notice a place where wow, the reader couldn't possibly have understood this until, I explained X, Y, and Z, then all you really need to do is just reverse those things, right? So if you're asking the reader to understand something in paragraph 1 that you later explain in paragraph 2, then the fix is you reverse those paragraphs and make it easier on the reader. And then another thing to fix is head hopping. So you really want to keep in mind that if your point of view character can't see it, then you and the reader can't either. This is a way to get us closer to your characters. We do not want just omniscient stuff. We're not sort of living in a writing era where omniscient makes readers happy. And this means that you're either writing from first person or a third person close perspective, meaning you're writing through somebody's eyes, even if you're saying she did this, he did that. And this is really easy to mess up. So just look out for those times where maybe you're saying, your main character is Sandy, but then suddenly you're saying Bob felt something. Okay, if your main character is Sandy, then Sandy doesn't know how Bob feels. So I can say apparently Bob felt something. I can say maybe Bob felt something. I can say apparently Bob thought or saw or did something. But if I don't see him do it and I'm not in his head, then I don't know what's going on, and the reader shouldn't either. All right, so you want to look for that stuff. As far as how to edit, so what's the best way to do this in terms of tools of the trade? So basically you've got sort of two big choices here. You have Scrivener, and then you have Microsoft Word or an equivalent. So maybe a Google Docs or a Open Office or whatever it is that you're using that is like Microsoft Word. Now, even if you are using Scrivener, almost for sure at some point you're going to want to compile your document and put it into a form that you can use in Microsoft Word. So we're going to talk about compiling in just a second, because that's pretty hard for a lot of people. But but before we get there, so, generally speaking, most writers are writing in Scrivener to begin with. And when it comes to editing, now you've got kind of a problem. Because even though Scrivener is amazing for thinking out your story, it is not so good for editing in the sense that you don't have track changes. So if you want to make sure that you're watching what it is that you're editing, it's not that easy to figure out how to do that. Now, there are some tricks. So let me show you a trick real quick here. So this is my manuscript, and let's suppose that I want to make sure that as I'm editing, so I want this scene to be the scene I'm editing right now, but I don't want to do something that I can't later change. So let's see this arrow. So way over here to the right, see this little eye up here in the corner? So this is your inspector panel, and this then here underneath it is all the inspector panel. And these little tiny icons here all do lots of different things. Now, if you were watching or with me the first day of our presentation, you know that the inspector is essentially a way that Scrivener shows you visually the metadata that's associated with your file. So this is stuff that wouldn't actually print out if you were printing the document, but it's still in the little file properties or file notes or whatever. Now, one of the cool things that Scrivener has is this snapshot thing here. So see this little camera here that says snapshots? If you click this, you'll get a screen that looks like this. And it'll say snapshots right here. And then there's a little plus and a little minus here. Now, if I click plus, then Scrivener is going to create a snapshot of the document here as it is right at that moment. So now if I click this, see how down here in this little box all this text appeared? So this is how the document was when I took a snapshot. So now let's say that I want to totally change something. I don't want to fly into Chicago on a Saturday morning as I have here. I want to fly into Detroit on a Saturday morning for my best friend's wedding shower. Okay, so I make this change in the document, and then I move on. I write something about my hero Matthew, who's about to meet the girl of his dreams. I go on to other things that are going on in the story, and then I'm oh shoot, I really don't like that change where I made it so that they were going to Detroit to do the shower instead of someplace else. So if that happens, then I'm going to want to change that back, right? And the way that I do that in Scrivener is I go back up to that document where I made that change, and then I click that snapshot, which was of the document before I made the change. And then I click this button here that says roll back. So rolling back is going to move the document back to what it was when I took this snapshot. I'm going to say yes. And see, now Scrivener is telling me that the document says I fly into Chicago, not Detroit. But notice that it also made another snapshot. So it made a snapshot of what the document was like before I rolled back. Some cool things about this function, you can name your snapshots. So if I double click this title here, double click it, I can say Chicago shower, and then I know why it is I took the snapshot. Or here, maybe what I want to say is this is my 9-day novella before edit snapshot or something like that. So I can do that so I know what the snapshots are of. And then I can also do something really cool here. So if I want to take a full snapshot of the manuscript, so let's suppose you're thinking, yeah, but I'm going to be editing a lot. I'm not going to remember to do this stupid snapshot thing, right? Okay, I get it. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that all of your manuscript folders are open. So you can do that by clicking manuscript and then going to view and then outline. Oops. Sorry, manuscript, view, outline, expand all. And see how that made it so that now like we can see all of my documents and folders here. And then what you're going to do is click the top folder, press the Shift key, click the very bottom document. So now we have all of these things highlighted or selected in the program. And then right click anywhere in there. And let's see if we can't find a way. I take that back. So don't right click. So click Documents and then go down to Snapshot. And then we are going to take snapshots of selected documents. All right, so now if I click on any of these, a new snapshot will have appeared. Now, so let me go through that again since I kind of flubbed that one part with the right bit. So let's suppose we've got some of these, I don't know, not expanded. So first of all, manuscript, view, outline, expand all, click the top folder, press and hold down the Shift key, click the bottom file, go up here and click Documents, go down to Snapshots, and then click Take Snapshots of Selected Documents. Or here's another cool one, take titled snapshots. So maybe I want to take a titled snapshot, and this one is going to say pre-9-day novella edit. So now every time that I go and click on one of my documents, I see I have a snapshot here that's titled pre-9-day novella edit, and I can roll back any of these documents. So a really cool little trick for if you are using Scrivener. So let's go back then to our little slideshow here. There are a lot of advantages to using Scrivener for edits. Obviously, it's easier to sort of add scenes, move scenes, copy and paste, and you do have that fantastic little snapshot button. But it is also true that track changes are hugely helpful when you're editing. So even that snapshot thing probably isn't going to do it when you get to the proofreading stage or more like nitty-gritty editing. And certainly Word has major advantages, or using any sort of like processor like Google Docs or OpenOffice or whatever other than Scrivener. So for example, it lets you see your words in another format, and sometimes just seeing them on like a different page with different margins helps you catch stuff that you wouldn't otherwise have caught. You get more robust spelling and grammar checks. The Scrivener spell check is just really not that impressive. So when you're in Scrivener, you're not going to get the Microsoft Word spelling or grammar, and you also don't get the ability to do plugins very easily. So like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, which we'll talk about tomorrow, don't fit really well with Scrivener. And then also when you are working with Word, you have a better ability to share with beta readers or critique partners or critique groups or whoever it is that you want to see your manuscript. So realistically, you're not going to send a Scrivener file to your critique partner. You're going to send a document with your manuscript to your critique partner, and that'll make it easier for them. And they're going to use track changes. So most likely at some point, you're going to want to skip to Microsoft Word. And that means that you need to be able to compile your document. And since Scrivener can be a little bit confusing, I thought that it would be helpful to do just a little bit of a tutorial on how to compile a document in Scrivener. So I'm going to go through this twice. So first of all, if you want to use Scrivener, that PowerPoint is a little bizarre. If you don't want to use Scrivener, then you're going to need to compile your manuscript first. So the first thing that you're going to do to get there is click File and then click Compile. And possibly what will happen is a little small box like this will pop up. If you get a little small box like this, this is not helpful for you. You need more. So you want to make sure that you click this little arrow right here, this down arrow. And if you do that, then what will happen is you will get this much larger box. So this is where you want to work from. Now notice a couple things here. So first of all, this box up at the top here that says manuscript, this is what Scrivener defaults to. Scrivener is going to sort of automatically look for any documents that are in your manuscript folder. So if you do this and it says manuscript here, then and you don't see your documents down below in these like little white boxes here, then probably what you need to do is cancel out of the compile box, go back to your document, and make sure that you actually were writing your scenes and your chapters and putting them in this folder that says manuscript. So definitely make sure that you're doing that. A couple notes on this like little contents page. So notice here that in this big box there are these little things over here that say content, separators, formatting. These are tabs. So each one of these tabs gives you different settings for Scrivener's compile. We're on the contents one right now, and that's going to show you everything that you're including in your compile. And the goal of compile is to take everything you've done in Scrivener and export it into a Word document or a rich text document or something else that you can use, an EPUB. In some other format. So as far as like the settings here, you can scroll through what is listed here. Under the include column here, you want to make sure that anything that you want in your document, in your compiled document, has a little check in the checkbox. So make sure that it's that under include, your documents are all checked. There's a little drop down here that says compile included documents. So this is something that you also want to have in your settings. If it doesn't say compile included documents, then click that little down arrow and make sure that you do have a box that says compile included documents. The page break before boxes. So I don't have any of these checked because when I'm editing, I don't really care about page breaks. But if you click these, the boxes here next to any document, then Scrivener will automatically put a page break into your document before whatever the file or folder is. And if you click as is next to any of these documents, then Scrivener will automatically use the formatting that you used in that particular document when it compiles. Now that is important because otherwise, Scrivener is going to convert your formatting for every single file and every single folder into what you tell it to convert everything to under the formatting tab right here. So if you have something where you like specially formatted it, make sure to click as is. And then for some of you, you may have front matter. So front matter is stuff like the copyright, the dedication, the title page. If you have that, then there's probably a little folder in your Scrivener file, and I'll show you this again in a second. But there's probably a little folder that says front matter. If you want to add that into the document, then you want to click this thing that says front matter here and make sure to find that front matter folder in this little box before you move on. Okay, so next, once you've got the contents all set up the way that you want them, then we want to go to the separators tab right here. In the separators tab, you tell Scrivener how to separate all of your files and folders, and here there's a lot of different choices. So generally you can do things like put a page break between the different texts and folders, or put a single line or a return. I usually tell Scrivener to put hashtags between all of my files and folders. And I do this because later on, when I want to import my stuff back into Scrivener so that I can create a good EPUB out of these files, those hash marks are going to tell Scrivener where everything divides. So if I have them, then I'm basically later going to be able to say to Scrivener, okay, so here's my edited document that I'm happy with. Now I want you to import it back in, and Scrivener will know where to break up my very, very long Word document and turn it into separate folders and separate files. You don't have to do that, but I find it helpful. Next, in terms of formatting, so when you click the formatting button here, this is going to give you lots of choices for how to format the different files. And like I said, Scrivener will override any document that wasn't checked as is. But this is a little bit tricky. So for example, things like like this title down here. So this means that Scrivener is going to include the title of any level 1 folder. And if this seems confusing, or like you're thinking, how on earth do I change any of this, then stick around, because I'm going to go through this twice and give you a little bit of a better look with a screen share in a second. But basically, you can change all of the format by clicking in this like little box down here. And then if you wanted to do something, if you wanted to do something like make all of that text Times New Roman, then you're going to highlight and maybe click this little A here, which will give you a bunch of font options. Or if you want to make something bold, generally, then you can click the bold. If you want something special in the section, so maybe you want like a header title or like a chapter title, then you can use the chapter layout button to do that. And if that seems complicated, then I encourage you, one, to play around with it. So try different things and see what happens depending on what you click. That is the best way to learn any program. And second, don't overthink it. Scrivener is robust partially because it is basic. So in some cases, what's happening if you can't figure something out is that it's just a lot simpler than you realize. And then lastly, if you're having serious trouble with this, there are gazillions of Scrivener tutorials online. Find one about formatting and really watch it to make sure that you know what it is that you're doing. So lastly then, as far as editing goes, for the compile settings, almost none of the rest of these like little tabs here are important for editing. So like the transformations tab will give you a lot of choices for things like straightening your smart quotes. I don't check any of those boxes except for remove highlighting and remove text color. Footnotes are almost never relevant for a fiction writer, but if you are a non-fiction writer or you have footnotes because you're a fiction writer and you did something, I don't know, wonky with a copyright issue or something, you want to check those out and make sure your footnotes are included. With page settings, so this thing that I'm showing you right here, these are page settings. This will tell Scrivener how you want your document set up. So you could tell it margins or paper size, orientation. Down here under page header, these checks not on page 1 or count page 1. This is this header going to appear on page 1 or not? And also then what's that going to look like? If you click choose here next to font, you can change the fonts. You can make them like, whatever you want, Garamond or something. But honestly, this particular page is probably, or this particular set of settings is probably the least important thing that you can do, because once you get your stuff into Word, it's really much easier to make those changes there. And you're probably going to have to make changes anyway, so don't worry too much about this. You don't have to get this particular part right. So after you're done with your settings, then you're just going to go down here to where it says Compile For. You're going to click this little down arrow and find the particular file format that you want. So there's like RTF or .doc or .docx. So click the one that you want, and then you press compile. Scrivener will give you an option to let you save your compiled document somewhere. Make sure you know where you save your document, and then you'll be able to open it up and see what happened. Now, since that is probably a lot if you haven't done this before, let's go through it. So here is my manuscript again. So, and I want to show you just a couple of things. So, for example, here under the inspector box, again, remember this is all, like this inspector panel here is all about metadata, but your compile settings are metadata. So if you click this little arrow right here that next to general metadata, then you'll see a bunch of little options. And this, by the way, is under this little tab here, the little notebook. So you can, for any individual document, change your label, your status, or see these 3 little checkboxes. Remember a few minutes ago we talked about how in content, we want to make sure that anything that we want included in compile actually has that little check next to it. I'm going to uncheck it for this document, and I'm going to check page break before and compile as is, so that you can see when you check things here, it changes it in your compile settings also. So you do want to double check every time because the compile settings could be changed by you as you're going through your document. So now let's suppose that we're ready to compile. So I'm going to click File, and then I'm going to click Compile. Okay, now for me, the big box came up. It might have looked like this for you. If that is true, then you want to press that down arrow. Okay, so now we are looking at the manuscript documents. Now, if you click that down arrow there, you'll see that you can also choose to only compile like certain parts of your manuscript. So maybe I only want the first chapter. And if that's the case, I'm going to click this one first folder. And then Scrivener's going to know, okay, so I'm only putting these 2 chapters into this compiled document. But we're editing, so we want the entire thing. So I'm going to click that box again and click Manuscript. Okay, now we want to make sure that we've included everything. So there should be a checkbox next to every document that I want included. So I'm going to either scroll down with my mouse or click this little box and then drag to scroll down. And while I'm doing this, I am looking for stuff like this. So see this document here that where I changed the settings in my larger program. Oops, there's not a checkbox next to it. So I want to make sure that this is included, so I'm going to check this. And also, I don't want a page break before that document, and I don't want to compile it as is. So I deselect those boxes and then look over here. So this was that document, and see how Scrivener automatically changed that in the inspector panel too. So this is always going to match up with what you have here in the compile box. So looks like for me, I've got everything checked. Remember that there's this little box here that says compile included documents. I could also compile excluded documents. So in that case, nothing that I have here will be included. Or I could say all. So in that case, I wouldn't have to worry about the include because everything would come in. But sometimes there is something that I don't want to include. So I'm going to make sure that mine says compile include. And then one more thing here, there's this little front matter thing. So if you click add front matter, then Scrivener is going to give you the ability to look down through the rest of your folders for your front matter. So front matter usually needs to be outside of the manuscript in its own folder. So if you have a folder that says front matter, then you are looking for that, and you're going to click that whole folder, and then every document in that folder is going to show up. Now, this is actually not my front matter folder because I don't want that included in mine, but or because I don't have that in my file yet. But if you had it, you would see that all of your documents in your front matter folder showed up here. So I'm going to deselect that because that's not part of my file yet. And then I'm going to go to separators. So now separators again is what I do to tell Scrivener how to divide the stuff, the different like texts and folders in my document. And remember, for me, I want to do a custom mark here. So your choices are single return, empty line, page break, and custom. I always pick custom. I put a hashtag in there. And notice that Scrivener is giving you options for all the different ways that folders and files can be separated. So that's saying, like right here, for example, over to the left, you see that my first chapter is a folder and then a text document. So between a folder and a text document, Scrivener currently is telling me it's going to put just an empty line. Well, I want that to be a hashtag. And likewise, between, say, a document and a folder, I want a hashtag. And if I happen to have 2 folders next to each other, then I also want a hashtag. And if I happen to have 2 documents next to each other, I also want a hashtag. And just as a reminder, so your file should be set up so that every folder is supposed to be a chapter. The titles of the folder should be your chapter titles, if you're going to have chapter titles. And then your documents underneath those folders, those are all individual scenes. So if there's going to be a scene break at any point, you want to make sure that you included an entirely different file so that you can tell Scrivener, I'm going to need a break between this part of my chapter and this next part. Okay, so now let's look at the formatting, which is the most confusing bit. So you'll see that like all this stuff here on the left is suddenly highlighted, right? So that's really weird. When I clicked separators, everything looked the way it was like previously with all my color coding. And now I click formatting and oh my gosh, there's stuff that's highlighted. So what is going on here? So what's going on here is Scrivener is showing me what part of my manuscript I am like looking at in terms of formatting. So right this second in this box here, I have level 1 clicked. So level 1 is all of the highlighted files here. So for me, level 1 is all of my folders. And again, those are supposed to be chapters. Now, I don't actually have text in my level 1s, so it doesn't really matter if I include that text or not. So I can have that in there or I cannot. There's no text in my folders, so nothing is actually going to appear in my compile. But I do want to make sure that I include the titles because those are my chapter titles. So see if I click title here, then suddenly title pops up down here in this little box. So this is giving me an example of what things are going to look like after I press compile. And I want my titles to be centered. And also, I think I might want them to be all uppercase. So I'm going to click section layout and go here to case. And then I'm going to ask Scrivener to make all of my titles uppercase. Now notice this like little prefix suffix thing. So this is what's going to go before or after the title. And I can actually change that here. So let's see if I can remember what some of these actually are. I believe if I do $tag, apparently not. Let's try. Let's see if I can give Scrivener the right code. We may have to do this part at a different time when it matters more. Yours may have defaulted so that there's something actually in here, that there's like a little prefix that says something like these little arrows and then like maybe a C or something like that. Let's do a little look here to see what Scrivener actually wants from us, because when we use this little bit, we're basically coding in Scrivener. So I'm looking this up on my phone real quick. All right. If you look up codes for compiler in Scrivener, you'll get like all these fantastic placeholder codes. So this will tell you what you can put in these boxes to tell Scrivener what to do. And I want some numbers in there. So what I want is not page numbers. I think I might just want an N. Okay, so let's do this. I want to number my chapters. So I'm going to type in $N. Okay, that's what we want. So see how I have a 1 there now next to title? So this is going to make it so that every time that Scrivener compiles the document, there's a 1 there in that title. And let's suppose I even want it to be a little bit better than that. So maybe I want it to say chapter 1. See what happened there? And I believe we can even get a little bit fancier here. So I think that if we write arrow hash T. Oh, we don't want that. So if it's a T there instead of an N, then we're going to get the letters chapter 1. But I want that title thing to be below chapter 1, right? So how do I do that? Let's see if just clicking enter does it. There we go. So remember I said that sometimes Scrivener takes a little experimentation. Don't get too frustrated with it. This can be really frustrating, but the more you play around with it, the more you'll understand how it works. So like in this case, it turns out that I just need to make sure that there are 2 lines here in prefix in order to get it so that my actual file reads chapter 1. And this is really interesting because now Scrivener will automatically chapter or number my chapters. So like for this first one here that says I'm supposed to be the BFF, in my compiled document, Scrivener will actually write chapter 1, and then under title it'll say I am supposed to be the BFF. And then under I meet the girl of my dreams, that will say chapter 2, and then title. Now this obviously isn't something that you always want, but it's a pretty nice little feature, and it's nice to even be able to do things like change the case. So maybe I want the title to be normal, but I want the prefix to be uppercase. So I want chapter 1 to be all uppercase. I want title to be lowercase. Okay, so that's the title of the folders, but we have other things in this document. So if I click here on level 1 plus, nothing gets highlighted, and that's weird, right? But that's okay. So we are just looking for the next thing that actually shows us what we have. And aha, here we go. So if I click level 1 plus here, now what gets highlighted are all of my documents. So these are those scenes. And I don't need to put the title of any of these on there because I don't want my little tiny individual titles to be included. Maybe you do. If so, you can format that. But I do want to think about, well, how is this formatted, right? So what I can do is I can click here in the example text, and I can see if I need to do some changing of anything. So, maybe I need to... Will Scrivener let me do anything here with this? And why won't Scrivener? Aha. Okay, so again with the experimentation, so did you see that I clicked override text and notes formatting? So I want to tell Scrivener how to format my stuff, so I clicked this little checkbox, and then that lets me highlight the example text and then click this little A, and that is going to let me do things like choose Garamond font and size 12, so that when Scrivener compiles my stuff, it's in size 12. I can change the spacing here, so I can make a double space. I can change the paragraph indentation. I usually like a 0.25 paragraph indentation. I can make things bold. I can change the color. And because I click this little check here, I can also do that here with the chapter title. So remember, we also have fonts for that. So I want mine in Garamond. Scroll down, make it Garamond. I could change the size if I wanted. I prefer everything to be size 12. And I can do the same then for my titles here. So I can change this to Garamond or whatever, make sure they are size 12. And if I don't want bolds, then I can get rid of that. So there. So now all of my chapters are going to look like this page padding thing. So if I want there to be lines at the very top, I can create that. If I don't have to. It doesn't show you very well what's going on with this. And I usually don't care to do this in Scrivener, but if you want Scrivener to do padding for you, you can. Let's look at transformations real quick. So here you can change again how Scrivener compiles things. So if you had smart quotes, they can straighten those smart quotes, or you can convert ellipses to a triple period. I never use these because in my final document I want things like smart quotes. I do sometimes remove highlighting and text color and hyperlinks, but you don't have to do any of that. You can mark the end of your text with something, so this will be the very, very, very end, so you can put in the end. You can make sure that hyperlinks are colored and underlined, but most of this is not super, super important, and I would actually recommend, if any of this seems confusing, don't click any of it. You can change it later on in Word. This is a replacements function. I have never used this, and I don't really recommend this because I don't think there's much of a reason to do it. But I suppose if you were like changing names to protect the innocent in some creative nonfiction, then this might be a place to do it. If you have footnotes and you don't want them to appear, then there's a remove footnotes thing here. If you have footnotes and you want them to be a particular formatting, then you want to click this override font. If you have comments, again, we can keep them in or take them out. I never use comments or footnotes as a fiction writer, so this usually doesn't apply to me. And then here we have our page settings. So like for me, I'm going to want my header to say, he burned toast. Ash. I want to choose again to put this in Garamond because I like to just do that work for myself ahead of time. I prefer my page numbers in my header, so the page number is symbolized by that little arrow $P$. So there I'm going to have a page number for everything. Just in case Scrivener does something weird, I'm going to make the footer Garamond also. Okay. I'm going to align the header to the right. I'm going to align my footer to the center. And actually, so that you guys can see what happens with that, let's take that page number and put it back into the footer. And I don't want it on page 1, but I do want to count page 1. So I'm going to include page 1 in my documents, but you won't actually see the header. And those are all of the settings. Now, if you are happy with this preset, then you might want to consider saving it. So you might actually click Save here and save this as, say, Sandy's manuscript editing format. So now, if you want these same settings applied, all you have to do is click here and say Format As, and you'll find your different settings under My Formats. Scrivener also has some preset things. So you'll notice here that if you click under Format As, you can click things like ebook or general nonfiction or paperback novel. And all of these will set up specific settings for you. No matter what you do under Format As, you still want to make sure that you double check in your contents that you have included everything you want included. All right, and then one more thing here. So see this compile for thing? We want to click this down arrow. And you want to make sure that you know what you're compiling this for. So I want a docx. I'm going to click that, and then I'm going to click compile. And now I got to find a place to save this. So this is under my pen name. Save it under Wesley Ash. Put this in Yummy Romance under drafts. This is a second draft of He Burned Toast. And I'm going to click Save then. And now Scrivener tells me that it has compiled the document. So let's take a look and see if we can't find that in here. So here's my File Explorer. There's that drafts folder again. And we want to find, there we go, second draft, He Burned Toast. So I'm going to double click this and I'll show you exactly what happened here. Now, this is my compiled document. Okay, and there we have it. So see that this is my first chapter. I've got chapter 1. There's that title, just the way that I titled it in the folders. There's my hashtag that's going to go between all of my folders and all of my files. So I'm going to be able to see every time that there is a new chapter, there should be a hashtag beforehand. So let's find that up. Like here we go. Here's chapter 2. And notice how Scrivener automatically did that for me. And now I told you that some of this is a little easier to change later on your own. So like, for example, your headers. So if I double click this, maybe I don't like how this looks, or maybe I want it to be, I don't know, all caps or something like that. It's pretty easy to fix that here. Likewise, pretty easy to do things like fix your numbers. So like maybe I don't want numbers at the bottom, maybe I want them at the top. Whatever, I can do that in Word. And same with margins. So I can pretty easily go back now and say, oh, no, I actually want like really small margins, or I'm fine with the 1-inch margins or whatever. But notice something else here. So these first chapters are chapters that I have already edited. See all those like little blue things here? This is where Word thinks that there is a problem, but Scrivener did not. So like we aren't doing a handshake. Let's see what join word parts. Apparently handshake is one word, not two, and Word caught that, but Scrivener did not. So you see that there's like kind of an advantage there to using Word. Okay, so I'm going to pause for 1 second in case anybody is watching. Does anybody have any questions that they want me to go over? Because I think that compile stuff can be really tricky, and that like it really takes a lot of patience to make it work. So while you're doing that, I'll show you this one more time. There are my contents. Everything is included. I don't have front matter. Here's my formatting. This is the real hard part. The folder here, this represents chapters. When we're talking about title here, that's actually what I titled the folder. So if I want to change a chapter title, I got to change it in the folder title. I don't care about this because when I click it, nothing gets highlighted, which means that there is nothing in my document that counts as whatever this is. But all of my files are level 1+ here. So when I click this, I see all of my different little scenes. I don't want to include those titles because those were just my notes. I do want to include the text. So like I don't want a scene to be titled Kathy is Lacey's high school BFF. But I do want the chapter to be titled I am supposed to be the BFF. And then again, I have changed this stuff right here. So this is what most of the chapters are going to do. And hopefully Scrivener will compile this all pretty for me and it'll look fantastic. Please don't get discouraged if it's hard for you the first several times. You can see, even as I'm going through this, and I've used Scrivener for years now, that it's just a little tricky to remember absolutely everything. So do your best with it. Hang out with writers so that if you have trouble, you can say to somebody, how on earth do I get this to change? Look for the Scrivener tutorials. They are very, very good. And now, so just a couple more things on editing. So one more thing on the how. Do you need another set of eyes? So now you have your manuscript in a Word document or a text file. What are you going to do with it? So you can and should edit your own stuff in Scrivener and probably also in Word. You may also want to enlist beta readers, critique partners, or critique groups. These are different things. So a beta reader is somebody who's one of your early readers. So they are not meant to critique your stuff. They're meant to just read and tell you things like, did they like it? Or did they notice major consistency problems? Or was your character believable? You're also going to have potentially critique partners. So this is one person that you would work with who might do stuff like go through with a real critical eye and say, this sentence makes no sense. These scenes are boring. This place made me laugh. So your critique partner is going to give you real critique, and a critique group is probably going to do the same as a critique partner, except it will be many people critiquing your stuff and telling you what they think needs changed. Now, a word of warning, beta readers are usually unreliable. So most beta readers have an idea in their heads of what it means to be a beta reader, And they may or may not do what you want them to do, and they may or may not be as critical as you need them to be. So look out, because beta readers are wonderful and they're great fans, but they aren't necessarily people who are going to give you the feedback that you need. A great critique partner can be like a huge help if you find somebody who shares your style. But you want to be very cautious about critique groups. So certainly a critique group can give you a lot of good advice about your writing, but you have to be careful, because whether a critique group is good or not will depend a lot on how it is facilitated and who is in the group. So for example, if you get a lot of people in the group who are very, very new to writing, then it could be that the advice that they're giving actually isn't good advice. Or if you get a bunch of people who are sort of like old salty dogs, and they've gone through this over and over and over again, then they might not be terribly supportive of a newer writer. You can also end up with situations where a critique partner looks for something specific in your writing that they have had a problem with in theirs. And that's not good for you, right? Because it could be that their problem isn't yours. Like maybe they have an issue with speech tags, and because of that, they go through and take out every time that you said. But maybe you didn't have that problem, and maybe from an objective standpoint, you were actually pretty balanced. The person who like sort of has a specific writing issue that they're trying to resolve is sort of likely to not be terribly objective. So critique groups can be pretty rough for new writers. Ideally, you'll have an editor. So, in a perfect world, you pay somebody who is a professional to go through and edit your stuff and tell you professionally what needs to be changed for this book to work for your genre. For a novella, realistically, you're not going to hire an editor. You probably should, right? Like probably for everybody, we should have a copy editor who can go through and make sure our commas are all in the right place. Probably in an ideal world, we all have a developmental editor who goes through our novels and says, this story needs this or that. The pacing is good. The pacing is slow. The pacing is too fast. You need another scene. You need to give me more development of this character. But developmental editors can be extremely expensive. Copy editors are also expensive. And when you are writing a 20,000 word novella or a short story and you're trying to get it published in 9 days, you may also not have somebody who has the time for that. So look, I don't discourage you from getting another set of eyes, but I think that when you do it, you should go in understanding that there are things that can happen, and you will also be slowed down. All right, so last set of points. When to edit. These are just a couple quick practical tips. Your eyes are going to be freshest in the morning, so do not do this when you are exhausted. You can make the view on Scrivener or Word bigger. Here, let's just make sure we all know how to do that, right? So in Word, this would be a really hard way to edit. If I really want to be able to edit, I want to zoom that in, right? So I may want to be looking at it more like that, or maybe that's a little bit big, but maybe I want it at 190% so that I can really see if I create an error. Likewise in Scrivener, this little arrow here at the bottom of your screen, this will let you make your text much bigger. So when you edit, you might want your text at 150%, or maybe you want to be looking at it at 300%, or whatever it is that makes it so that your eyes can actually see what it is that you need to see. Your words will probably start running together no matter how big those words are, and it will be harder to focus as you go on, so don't do everything in one great big session. Take some breaks, sort your mail, walk your dog, do whatever you need to do to make it so that your eyes are fresh from chapter to chapter. And then lastly, be hard on yourself, but not too hard. This is a novella. Your goal here is to finish a good product you can sell, not create a perfect product. And P.S., you're never going to finish a perfect product. So really resist that urge, right? Like that's not good for you if you're the kind of person who cannot turn something out unless it is absolutely perfect. Okay, so I'm going to just check and see if I have any questions there. I don't see any questions in the comments. So if you are joining us, then there will be another short workshop on proofreading tools. I'm going to do that tomorrow. I don't know if I've set a time for that yet. It will probably not be 8 a.m. It'll probably be something like 10 or 11. And if you are following along online, you may notice that there is a workshop missing. So I have not yet put up a day 5 workshop about how to make it pretty. That's because there's a whole lot of tools. So I'm going to post that at some point. I know those of you locally got to see most of that. But if you're following us online, there will be a day 5 video at some point. And then we're also headed towards our day 9 video, which is going to be on actually publishing stuff. So I'm going to go back through some more Scrivener things there, get a little nitty grittier, and show you how to make an EPUB. And that is even harder in terms of Scrivener. So if you had struggles with Scrivener today, you might want to consider an easier program. I'll try to show you some better options also. But for now, all you're doing is editing, right? So I hope that all of you have a great day, finish that editing, enjoy the process, right? Because you're actually past most of the hard part, or at least you're past most of the hard writing part. The technical parts we've still got coming up. And thank you for joining me. And one more thing. So as you know, we're doing this on the WordStitch channel. So WordStitch is a channel devoted to virtual write-ins. My WordStitch partner, Chloe, and I, who is currently being represented by her cat in my videos, my 9 Novella videos. Chloe and I are both live on Mondays from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and we do virtual write-ins during that time every week, and we are gearing up for NaNoWriMo, so we're for sure going to have tons of those over the next couple months in preparation, and then as we go through Nano. So come to us if you need people to write with and people to motivate you. We love doing word sprints, and subscribe to the channel. All right, so thank you so much, and you guys all have an excellent day. Bye.